Hey guys, Tom here. We have got a really fascinating pod for you today. We've got Adam Rolston and Ron Rutland on, who completed the longest hole, played across Mongolia, 2,011 kilometers, par 14,000. This pod itself was a bit of a logistical nightmare because Adam's based in Hong Kong and Ron is based in South Africa. So we had to do it all over the internet, and it was a bit of a nightmare, but we think we've got it together for you guys, and it's honestly worth. The story is incredible. Alongside this pod, we're going to be dropping the trailer video on our Instagram, so make sure you check out to see what they did, and this is explaining the whole journey that they went through. This is a great story for you guys, so I hope you enjoy it.
Watch this. No way!
Right, so here we go. We've got Ron and Adam. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start by playing a little clip from your trailer video so we've got a bit of context as to what we're talking about, and then we're going to dive straight into it.
This challenge is the longest single hole ever played. It's 2,000 kilometers. We're going to play in the rules and the spirit of the game all the way across Mongolia. So in essence, Mongolia is our fairway.
Wow, I mean, that just sounds amazing. Adam, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, how you doing, guys? Thanks for having us on.
Oh, no problem.
I'm Adam Rolston. I'm the golfer in this wild adventure called The Longest Hole. So, I'm based in Hong Kong, so I'm calling in from there now. And obviously, we're all locked down in the Corona situation. But, so like how this whole, I know Ron from, playing rugby in Hong Kong. And, so that's pretty much my story attached to this adventure.
And Ron, you're not from Hong Kong originally. How did you end up with Adam?
Yeah, a long story. I'm sure we'll get into it. Yeah, but Ron Rutland, I'm currently chatting to you gentlemen from the beautiful Natal Midlands in South Africa, but spent a lot of my life in Hong Kong and Asia. So as Adam said, through rugby circles, got to know each other, and through some wonderful coincidences, we reconnected a few years ago to make the longest hole happen.
And Ron, you've done a few little trips before, haven't you?
Yeah, so I guess, certainly the golfing thing was very different, but in 2013, I left Cape Town and I spent 2.5 years cycling from Cape Town through every country in Africa to the 2015 Rugby World Cup in the UK. And that was my sort of first real big adventure. Sold everything in the world to make it happen. And I guess it was initially a bit of a midlife crisis. It was a trip that certainly changed my perspective on a lot of things on the world and on, what I thought was possible and things like that. And I guess that trip ultimately led me to ending up in Nairobi, which is why Adam and I reconnected when he was there on rugby tour. So it was a strange set of coincidences, but a bit of experience in this sort of thing. And the first trip was on my own, which was a solo journey. So it was a good opportunity to do something with somebody else this time.
That's incredible, Ron. I'm thinking about how far did you cycle through Africa?
I speak in decibels and metric, but 42,000 Ks, which I think is about 26 or 25,000 miles.
So that's insane.
Yeah, so it's pretty much the circumference of the Earth around the equator. So that's probably the easiest way to think about it. And I went through 70 countries. So.
Did you manage to go puncture free, or did you get one?
Puncture free? No. It took a while to get the first, but dozens of punctures in the end. And I think the biggest puncture was myself. I think I lost about 25 kilos on the trip.
Oh, wow.
I guess, Adam, that kind of gave you enough kind of confidence that this man's got enough stamina to get you around Mongolia, right?
That's incredible. Sure. I mean, it was like once we sort of came up with the concept, Ron, I knew he was, a fairly hard individual, and we were always going to make it. So I had the right man on the bag.
So Adam, how did you come up with this concept? How did the two of you get together and come up with this?
So it's a hard one. It's sort of like growing up partially in Northern Ireland. I'd play golf along these sort of beaches up the north coast, and we would sort of hit a golf ball with my brothers, and we'd find ourselves sort of like 7 or 8 kilometers down a beach. And it's just a sort of like in my head, this idea about using golf as like a vehicle for adventure, you know? And then, you know, I was in Nairobi, as Ron said. I was playing rugby for Hong Kong, and Ron came and told his story about, you know, cycling through Africa. And I was sort of coming to the end of my rugby contract, and, you know, I was inspired by his story. And yeah, we just had a coffee, and we sort of talked over a sort of adventure, you know, I would like to get into, and golf was something that sort of kept running through my head in a way. And I sort of, you know, we started spitballing about, you know, playing the longest golf hole I ever played. And from there, I could see Ron's eyes sort of light up, and he was obviously gagging for a new adventure. And yeah, we just, from there, it just snowballed into this idea. And then, you know, sponsors got on board and things like that. And Ron, being the type of character he is in terms of loving to plan these sort of adventures, sort of took it by the horns. And, you know, 6 months later, we were teeing up in Mongolia, you know.
That's incredible, Adam. So
why did you pick Mongolia? What was it specifically that drew you there?
Well, it's a country with no fences. So I think when we looked at the map and we were, you know, planning to play continuously and in the rules and the spirit of the game as far as we possibly could, Mongolia was the place that stood out, because it looks like almost a fairway. It's nomadic, it's sparsely populated, and it has basically 0 fences. So for the 2011 kilometers Ron and I played golf, we actually didn't cross one fence the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, just to interrupt. I'd actually been to Mongolia a few years before, just on a rugby tour of all things. And I never actually got, you know, the team, we sort of did a little day trip outside of Ulaanbaatar, the capital, only maybe 30 kilometers outside of town. And it was just one of those countries that, for me anyway, like I always just knew I had to go back to. You sort of have, even on the outskirts of the capital city, you have these plains, or the Eurasian steppe that they call it, that run for miles and miles. And at that stage, I never had the foresight to look at it as a fairway, but it's certainly a country that just sort of draws you in for adventure.
Yeah, well, having seen a little bit of the clip of the clip that you put out, I mean, it doesn't look all like fairway. Some of it looks fairly harsh terrain.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't at all. I mean, it was we planned like rigorously, and we knew we were going to have a tough time in a lot of the areas that we were going to play golf in. And to be fair, we were riding by the sort of seat of our pants a little bit, even though we did plan, like I say, like to the hilt. But yeah, we started in a rocky glacier sort of landscape and found our way through the northern Gobi, and then over the mountains in the middle of Mongolia, and then finally into the steppe for the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it was a fairly grisly place to play golf, I would say, for the most part.
So for our listeners that aren't familiar with exactly what you've done, did you carry your own bags? What was the situation? How did you get across it?
Yeah, so basically, as Adam says, it was we wanted to do it as properly as we possibly could. So you know, obviously Adam had to play the entire width of the country. So we started at the most western point of Mongolia, up in the Altai Mountains. And from that point, which is our tee box, we actually set up a proper tee box. The European Tour were very generous to donate us markers and a yardage board, and we put it up on the most western point of Mongolia. And we approached the only major golf club in Mongolia, which sits on the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, the capital. And they very kindly allowed us to finish on their 18th green. So effectively, that 2010 or 2011 kilometers between those 2 points, Adam played the entire width of that country exactly within the spirit of the rules of the game of golf. So every time we lost the ball, sort of stroke and distance, take a penalty, and carry on. So Adam obviously had to focus on the playing the game, playing the golf. I had a sort of a trailer that we sort of manufactured. So I was pretty much like a donkey, had this trailer that I had to tow. And that we had a set of about 6 or 7 clubs. Adam insisted on having a driver, which obviously we only used on the first tee shot, and carried a putter the whole way for the final green. And in between that, Adam sort of stuck to 2 or 3 clubs mainly. And so it's 6 or 7 clubs, all our camping gear, food, water, dog food in the end, and everything else that a golfer needs.
You should have carried all 14, I think, there, Adam. You should have kind of given yourself some good options in the wedge game, some long irons. Just, I don't know. It just seems, never mind. Just Ron obviously got lazy, didn't he? Really?
Yeah, I could have added a few kilos to the 140 kilos he was already dragging.
Is that what it was? 140 kilos?
No, I think it was probably about 100 kilos maximum. What do you reckon, Ron? About 100 kilos?
Yeah, I think across the Gobi we had to we had 2 jerry cans of 25 liters of water for the long desert stretch. So I think that was, for sure the heaviest. So that probably added on extra 30 or 40 kilos there. But it's probably on average around 100, and depending on the food and water situation. We did lose a few things en route.
For sure.
I did want to ask actually about the because obviously you had a driver for the tee shot. I was wondering whether you hit your drive down there, and as soon as you sort of, we'll talk about the first day in a moment, but as soon as you got rid of the first drive, kindly buried it somewhere and thought, okay, that's a few kilos I don't need. Let's bury that.
That's the thing. Like, we wanted to make this as Ron said, as authentic as possible, and the fact that you carry all your clubs from start to finish in a normal round, that was something that we were quite passionate about doing, in terms of, the putter could have turned up as we were coming up to the green, but what was the point in that? We wanted to do this properly, right to the, and it's the quirky nature of it all as well. Like, we are having a bit of fun with it, but it was we were serious about committing and completing this thing in the best and most authentic way possible, and we did, it was very surprising in the end.
How did you keep track of your strokes then? So just on that, because you're playing within the rules. If you lose the ball, etc., you're counting your shots. Were you writing it down? Are you keeping it going in your head? How do you keep that?
So this comes down to the planning and the masterfulness of Ronald Rutland, I think. So, I mean, when we were planning this trip, like, we needed to do was work out, we wanted to be able to score accurately. So we got in touch with Dimension Data, which is a data company, and they built an app on a mobile phone. So, which was also linked to a GPS device in my backpack. So basically, every time I would hit the golf ball, I would press a Bluetooth button on my hat, which would send a signal into my phone, which would then add another stroke to the score, and in turn then upload the score to a website. So every time I would hit the ball, I'd press a button on my hat, and it would automatically drop a GPS pin for every single shot all the way across Mongolia.
Incredible.
A bit of thought. So it's not only the longest golf shot, it's like the longest shot tracking we've ever seen. You could start looking at strokes gained throughout 2,000 kilometers and everything here. How did you just one more in terms of the hole as well? How did you land on the par itself? Because you had a legitimate par. This was a recognized golf hole, right, by the powers that be. So how did you kind of arrive at that number?
I think we thumbtacked it ahead. We sort of took the 2,000 kilometers. I think we averaged it to about 150 yards a shot. We sort of said, it'll be like 14,000 shots. So it wasn't particularly scientific. It was sort of just a little bit of a thumbtack of what we guessed the average shot length would be.
You were over par significantly then, I'm guessing.
Weren't you tempted to set the par as like 25,000 so you could come in under your albatross?
Yeah, well, it was literally a finger in the wind, like Ron said. It was like we had been to Mongolia for like a recce trip to sort of figure out whether this idea was actually possible. So we played sort of 6 or 7 kilometers up to the golf club, maybe 2 or 3 months before actually going out and doing it. So we were like, yeah, at the golf club, at the back of the golf club, it was nice and flat, and we were hitting, 4 irons, and we were able to find the ball every time. And so, yeah, we came up with a score because of that, I would say. And it was obviously significantly different.
I don't know whose perspective I want to hear this from, but I'm probably going to ask Ron, actually, first of all. Why don't you tell us the story of the first day and the tee shot and what happened after the very first tee shot?
Oh, wow. Okay, so this was obviously a bit of a sore point to start the trip off on because obviously for about 4 months, well, in fact, we first sat down in Nairobi and talked about this idea. Adam already had in his head about how this tee shot was going to look. You know, standing on this mountain with eagles soaring. I think we had this picture of a whole lot of sort of Mongolian nomads standing behind us, cheering us on. And Adam spoke at length about how he was going to absolutely smash it down down the valley to start things off. So it took us a day and a half to actually get to the tee box from where we had flown into the most western town you could fly into Mongolia. It involved about, as I say, a full day on a jeep and half a day on camels. So we had to put the trolley and all our gear onto the back of these poor camels, which then took us to this most westerly point in this glacier. It was pouring with rain in the morning, and fortunately it sort of cleared up for half an hour for the tee shot itself. So we put up this yardage marker, which is probably about 2 meters high and a meter wide, so in the howling wind. So that was probably the first big challenge of the trip. And then Adam, to be fair, absolutely smoked the drive straight down the valley, but landed into about 3 foot long grass marsh. So I lost the very, very first ball of the trip. And then it took us a while to get going. It would be probably the fairest way to say it, because as I say, with all our planning and everything, just the wet and the swamp-like and the freezing conditions of that first few hours, I think meant that we hit about 10 shots in 2 hours and covered maybe 1 or 2 kilometers. So it was a very, very slow out the mark. And I think, to be honest, at the end of that first day, we had a little bit of a moment, just wondering whether maybe we'd bitten off a little bit more than we could chew. Pretty eventually.
Sure, yeah.
And Adam, it's every golfer's worst nightmare to be 5 off the tee in a medal. So how did you feel with the first couple of shots?
Well, it was a sort of unraveling. I think it was a combination of never really using the cart, and the cart was so top heavy at the point where like the wheels were almost buckling to the point where the spokes were almost snapping. So like we were so fearful that we were just going to have this false start right from the beginning, and then we lost the ball. I think we were actually savagely hungover from the night before, stupidly. Like it was such a ridiculous couple of days. Like when we actually set off from Bayanulgi, we had packed all our stuff. You know, we laid it all out, and Andrew King, who was the photographer, had flown in, but he had been delayed like 2 or 3 days in Qatar for some reason. And like I say, that we had only had a 90-day visa to complete this 2011 kilometer journey, and every day he wasn't arriving, it would just eat into the time that we had to complete it. So, you know, as soon as he came, you know, we ended up laying all our stuff out, putting it into the Jeep, and then we went out for dinner. And we sort of got roped into like this wedding, and this van was meant to pick us up at like 4 a.m. and we came back about 3 o'clock, and we had to just quickly put all our stuff into this like Russian Jeep and just head off. So it was a little bit of a mess in terms of, you know, what we would have, you know, liked to have prepared for this journey. But yeah, like Ron said, it was a real like day and a half to just get there, and then with the whole emotions of whether we're actually going to do this and the uncertainties. I just remember sort of being in that tent in that first evening, just thinking like, holy shit, like we're in for it now, and we're staring down the barrel of 80 days doing this same thing. And yeah, the next day was truly a learning curve.
And you've got the fear of a hangover just kicking in as well. 1 hour's sleep, still probably half cut on the first tee, and then the raging fear that starts coming in the afternoon. God, I bet that was a dark time.
So on your trip, guys, you managed to pick up a little dog with you, didn't you?
Yeah, so we were battling through the White River Valley, which is it's like a glacier runoff, and these steep faced valleys, and we were sort of planning for the weather to be sort of summery, and when we got down to these valleys, like it was the wind had changed. It was coming off the north down through like the White River, and it was freezing and muddy and cold. And we were meant to sort of complete 24, 25 kilometers every day. And, you know, we were only completing 7 or 8, and we were staring down the barrel of reality, thinking that, you know, we didn't think this task was possible. And, you know, after day 2 or day 3, we bumped into this black dog that just started following us. And, you know, we didn't give him any food at all. And he just sort of tagged along beside myself and Ron and Andrew, who was filming. And, you know, by the time we had completed another 2 days, he was still with us. And I kept trying to put him into every car that kept going past. You know, you might get the odd van, Russian Jeep going past maybe twice a day or 3 times a day. And every time I'm trying to get him away, because we had sort of got into the rhythm of our journey now. And we were completing 15 to 20 kilometers. And maybe day 4, day 5, we were actually hitting our target, you know, 20, 24 kilometers. And so by the time this dog had followed us, he was already 50 kilometers down the road. And Andrew and I and, you know, Ron, and well, you know, it was one of those things where, like, what do you do now? You have this dog and he's followed us for 50 kilometers. I think the only thing we can do is either try and get rid of him forcibly, or he just has to come with us, you know. So we named him UB, and we thought that he would, you know, potentially make it. It was Ulaanbaatar, UB for, you know, Ulaanbaatar for short, because we reckoned he might make it all the way. So he became part of the team, and he trotted beside, you know, Ron's cart and lay beside me while I was hitting golf balls, you know. So it was sort of became part of the team quite quickly.
And he made it the whole distance with you?
He did, yeah. So he went, you know, all the way through the desert. I know Ron touched on it, that there were some aspects of the trip that we had to carry a significant amount of water. And Ron obviously lugged like 50 kilos extra of water, you know, on his cart. So we actually had a section of desert. It was Bulgan Fine Ore. I know it extremely well. And it was a 5 to 6 day piece of our journey through the northern Gobi, where we were told that this would be the most dangerous part of our trip, and we weren't going to see anyone for the entire 6 days. And it was about 155 kilometers that we were going through. And UB would, you know, we'd get up at 4 a.m. and play golf until 9 and lie underneath a tarpaulin, and he would be there panting basically the whole time. And yeah, we had to ration water and food for him as well. And yeah, it was quite a hairy part of our trip. But you know, we kept thinking, you know, are we doing what's right for the dog, and whether taking it across the desert is that good? And we were thinking about getting him like a reflective vest, or trying to figure out a way to keep him cool in the desert. But he survived well, and yeah, he crossed the northern Gobi with us, which was fantastic.
That's incredible when you think. Did you ever think he'd actually make the full distance? Because like you reach a point where, you know, he's completely wedded to you and he's not going to leave your side. But you must have worried for his own welfare and thought, you know what, is he actually going to get through this walk? Like it's just it's an incomprehensible distance, right?
It is, but these Mongolian dogs are famous for, you know, riding beside Genghis Khan and, you know, missioning by themselves for miles and miles. You know, like wolves sometimes travel like 75 to 100 kilometers a day. You know, so he's quite wolfish, and I think we actually early on thought this dog would come with us, purely because, yeah, I just think, like Andrew was saying to me, like he was like, this dog's either going to bite me right now when he first saw the dog, or he's going to be with us the whole trip. And you know, one was right, which was cool. So yeah, I think we thought he would make it if he didn't just like wander off in the night or whatever. But as soon as you start building a bond with a dog like that, I think by the second or third week, you knew that he was in it for the long haul.
And I think, from having seen the film and doing a 2,000 kilometer hike, it comes with its stresses, and obviously you've both come out of the journey much stronger with a bond together that you're going to get through, you and Ron. But it was clear that during the journey, the dog became a bit of a manifestation of the stress between you. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, for sure. I speak at, our film's now gone to a fair few film festivals, and it's screened on National Geographic and stuff like that. So I get these questions quite a lot, and like I was lucky enough to be in the production process of this film, and a lot of my learning about myself sort of came after the actual journey. So I think I sort of am to blame in terms of like forcing the dog upon both of us in a way, and probably neglecting like Ron's side of the story slightly. And I think, it certainly wasn't a wedge between us. I would say, when you're with someone for 80 days, and there is, I probably wasn't so. I would say I probably didn't see it from Ron's side of at the time, if you understand what I mean. But what I'm saying is, me and Ron were 99.9% absolutely grand together, and it was probably that one little minuscule of a percent that it was the dog, So like I say, most of my learning from this story came after the trip.
I mean, it's clear now that you both. I mean, the fact that you're still friends and you've been through this. I mean, if I had to spend 80 days with Sam, I think I'd kill myself. But
I think, 18 holes is usually enough, isn't it? Or 9 to be more accurate.
That's enough for us, yeah. Just what was really clear, Ron, is that for you, you really, really grew a bond with the dog as it got on, didn't you?
Yeah, so it's as Adam says, it really was a bit of a I mean, I've never had a pet basically, so I was a little bit I guess taken aback by the added responsibility as much as anything. But once I got my head around it, and realized that just how loyal and with like this bond that this dog created, or that was created with this dog, it's impossible not eventually to fall for it. So it's very much a team of three by the time we walked into Ulaanbaatar, that's for sure.
And what happened to Yubi at the end then? What's Yubi doing with himself right now?
Well, that's also a fairly sad story, but also happy. So after the trip ended, after 80 days with us, and myself and Ron, we were looking for a really good home for Yubi. There was no chance we were going to take this dog out of his natural environment. And, when he was with us, he'd pretty much never seen roads or cars and things like that. So when we started coming into more major, I wouldn't say cities, I would say like little small towns, like he had no awareness of anything really in terms of human life. So he was never going to come to Hong Kong, or he wasn't going to go with Ron in his life. So we needed to find somewhere, that would be able to accommodate something like that. So we reached out to a lot of people for about 3 weeks before we ended, and we didn't get anything really back. And it was just a very, very lucky, I think it was a purple patch that we were in when we finished the trip. We just found him this amazing home in the national park just outside Ulaanbaatar. And I walked the dog down with a translator who was a guy that was with us, and I sat with an iPad and I showed them the dog's journey all the way across Mongolia. And they had this beautiful piece of land, and they were a caretaker of the valley during the wintertime for these tourist camps. And as soon as I was flicking through the iPad, like the old woman and the old couple was just like, yeah, it's a complete honor that we would take the dog. So it was a magical moment for both of us, I think, and we were super taken aback by the kindness of people and just how embracing they were of they could see the love that we were showing to the dog, and they took him on, which was great. And then a year later, I went back and visited the dog with my brothers and a few mates and stuff in minus 35 degrees, and we spent a day with the dog, which was great. But sadly, last summer the dog actually passed away. So it's been, I'm so happy that I was able to go back and actually see him again and see that he was happy and stuff like that. So it was a nice ending, but he was an old dog, and that was one of the main things about not taking him out of Mongolia and leaving him where he was. So I feel like it was a really nice way of completing his journey, if you know what I mean.
It's an incredible story that goes along with the film, and it's just another dimension, isn't it? I'm really interested because for a lot of our listeners, and myself included, Mongolia is a genuinely very foreign country. What was it like in terms of the people that you interacted with? Were you guys winging it in terms of where you were going to stay? Were you calling on the kindness of strangers? How did you tackle the language barrier? All of that sort of stuff, really. Kind of give us a bit of a flavour of how that went over the 2,000 kilometres.
Yeah, well, it was very much just Adam and I. So we didn't have a sort of a translator or a guide with us while we were on the trip itself. Other than when Andrew, the cameraman, joined us for a week at a time, 3 times, at the beginning, the middle, and the end. It was just Adam and I. So we relied on we had a magic letter. So we wrote a bit of a story about who we were, where we were from, and what we were trying to do, and with a few key phrases. And the guy that helped us plan the route in Ulaanbaatar, he translated it for us. So at least where people could read, we had something to show them, at least trying to explain who we were. And we also had little postcards made, again, just thanking people for their hospitality and their kindness. And so we sort of at least had a little gift that we could give people just sort of representing the trip, I guess. But in terms of where we stayed, we were sort of, as Adam mentioned earlier, we had a sort of daily target of around 25 kilometers that we sort of had to hit every day to sort of make sure we finished on time. So there's basically nowhere to stay. We just had our tents and sleeping bags and just would make camp. We try and get behind a big rock or a sand dune or some sort of protection if it was windy. But otherwise, just put up the tent next to the river or wherever there was somewhere relatively comfortable, make dinner for the evening, wake up and do it all again. And every now and then, we would come across a ger, which is sort of the nomadic tent that people live in. And we'd always go and say hello and introduce ourselves. And people, as you say, the kindness of strangers was incredible. Like every time people would invite us in for tea, and often the sort of fermented horse milk, which is basically like Mongolian vodka. So it was pretty disgusting. But it was always an icebreaker with the locals.
I was wondering, as a vegan, were you on the horse milk vodka? Was that something that you partook in?
No, I kind of cheated, unashamedly cheated. So I would sort of put it to my lips and pretend I was gagging on it, to pretend I was taking a sip, and then I'd hand it over to Adam, who would have to take double share. I got lumped most of the time.
It sounds like you managed to sniff out some great halfway houses on the way then, because everything I've seen, you seem to be putting vodka to your lips or thanking them for it. That's kind of, there seems to be so much of it with everyone.
Honestly, there's a huge, on a serious note, there's a huge alcoholism issue in Mongolia. But honestly, like me and Ron would be like strolling past a couple of gers, and we'd be welcomed in at about 9 a.m. And by the time we would be able to leave, we were about 9 shots deep and absolutely lashed. And we'd had to finish, like another 15 kilometers of golf, in the afternoon. It was quite, sometimes it just got annoyingly, it was annoying, but also like you're there for the journey, But yeah, no, it was, you just get welcomed in pretty much at every corner. If there's a little settlement, they'll ride over the hill with motorbikes, and you'll have to put tools down and get in for a bit of an afternoon session and then head back out, which was, it was always good fun.
And that's helped you golf, I'm guessing, right? Playing on a few beers now, back in Hong Kong, just feels like a breeze, right?
Well, I don't know about that. It's certainly more attritional, I'd say that for sure.
But there was clearly a kind of a juxtaposition of the game that you were playing and the formality of the game that you were playing and the terrain and the culture you were in. Did you find any locals that were aware of golf, or anyone did you come across that had a decent swing?
I think it was more the closer we got to Ulaanbaatar. So in the far west, we were extremely, isolated where we were. We would come across the odd Gur camp, or even just one or two Gurs every half day or whatever. So they would have basically not no knowledge, but they would have maybe seen a little bit of it, but they would certainly not have said like golf. So the closer we got, I would say maybe 500 or 600 kilometers outside Ulaanbaatar, they would start to recognize the game, and everyone wanted to go. I think Mongolians are so athletic and coordinated due to their pastimes like archery and horse riding, and they do both together, that they're actually like super coordinated at swinging a golf club. So there's been odd times where you're just in the middle of the road and some bloke will wander up and want to have a crack, and I don't know how many times, Ron, where you'd be standing there and someone would just literally flush one like out the center of a 7-iron.
The one thing we did so we underestimated the number of shots it would take, but we did overestimate the number of balls. So I think we originally planned for sort of 400 balls, but it became apparent quite quickly that with the right sort of caddy, you can keep that number down on lost balls. So we actually had quite a lot of spare balls. So we pull out, so when the locals were showing a bit of interest, I'd pull out some of the spare balls and give people a chance to have a crack at it. And but it's incredible how, as you say, like for most of the trip, no one had any idea what this game was. But there's something about sport and having, you pull out a ball and a stick, or a ball and a bat, or a ball and something, and people obviously have the idea that this thing's just got to be whacked. And it's amazing how kind of sport, even this most obscure sport, definitely does break down sort of cultural barriers. And as Adam says, a lot of people actually had, I'd say quite a good eye for the ball. But it was super cool to be able to share the game with people, even in the most unlikely of circumstances.
It's mad, isn't it, when you think you've probably never seen somebody swing a golf club before and hit a ball, and then you pick it up and intuitively know how to absolutely flush one with a 7-iron. I mean, it's a gift, right? Were there any bits where you guys felt scared or vulnerable, or kind of like, were there any like holy crap moments where you thought, do you know what, we might actually not get through this one all intact? Or
I don't think there was never a point. I've discussed this with Ron before. There was never a point where we didn't think we were ever going to give up. We never even mentioned anything like that, and we were never scared. I wouldn't say there were moments in the desert you would just be like, this is boring as shit, because you're lying under a tarpaulin for 12 hours. And there was an element of danger with that because we were rationing water and things like that. But other than that, like, I don't know, Ron, were we ever?
Yeah, I think we never felt, we never felt threatened by any individual, by any people. So there was never any aggression towards us. Quite, as I said before, quite the opposite. There were some nights where we were in the beginning where we were particularly cold. Sometimes in the middle of the desert when it was absolutely baking hot. And I'd say, like, if we had got lost in the desert and missed one or two of the little wells, that we were basically sort of aimed for these wells that we'd sort of identified. And so I think if we'd made a wrong turn, it could have ended. We could have got into a bit of an uncomfortable situation with water. But there was no threat from any animals. So it's, from that sort of drama point of view, it's definitely the one thing I'd love to be able to tell you about all these near escapes that we had. But ultimately, from a physical point of view, it was very, very difficult and tough and draining. But never actually would say that we actually felt in any sort of real life and death danger.
And do you think? Having to ration your water and having to stay under tarpaulins in the desert, and then when it was really cold, you'd have to wrap up. I mean, what do you think was harder? Do you think it was harder mentally, or do you think it was harder physically to complete the challenge?
Well, I think it's an everyday grind. So it was never going to be finished quicker than it was going to take, if you understand what I mean. So it was very much an attritional. It's quite. I mean, I use a lot of golf analogies. It was like super. It was every day as it came. Don't get bogged down in the 60 days left. The thought of this is this is going to take X amount of time, because you start losing your mind a little bit. But you got to stay in like present. And I think Ron kept talking to me about just being patient, and it'll fly, even though we were having so much fun. But you sort of, it's the attritional nature of doing the same thing every day, and actually having to, it was hard. It genuinely was hard for both of us. I know me saying it was hard and Ron pulling a 140 kilo cart, but genuinely it was mentally stimulating for me a bit more, I think, because I was looking for a ball and things like that. So it was almost hypnotic in a way, your day to day, but it's the attritional nature of knowing that you're staring down the barrel of especially if you don't know that you're actually going to complete it, if you know what I mean. So it was hard, but we had so much fun. Like it's the best time of my life by a long way, I think. And I don't know about you, Ron.
I'll give you a shorter answer. It was definitely a mental challenge. No. I mean, obviously, I think the body adapts quickly. Like it's incredible. Like you have I talk about the power of the made-up mind. Like Adam and I had put so much effort and planning. We put our lives on hold for this thing. There was absolutely no ways that we were, not going to finish this thing. Like we were just had this mental picture of us already, reaching the golf club at the end. We just, as I say, we committed everything to this trip, so we were really confident that we would finish it. But then once you start, then Adam had some quite serious back issues, sort of 3/4 of the way through. I had some issues with my ankle and hip. But it's so there's that sort of that certainly that physical test and that physical grind, but it's incredible. Like when your mind's made up about something, it's a very, very powerful thing. So it's just that, as Adam says, that waking up, you have no choice. If it's raining or snowing or 45 degrees outside, you have to wake up and you have to start playing golf. There's no like fair weather golf there, or let's wait for the right day. We're on such a tight schedule, and not having a choice actually made it easy. I guess easier like that. So the body adapts, and at the end, I didn't feel like one more day, but if it had to go another 10 days, I think we both would have been fine with it as well.
And it's amazing listening to you guys talking about it. Like, what you said, Adam, there, that it's actually, there's a lot of similarities with a typical round of golf or people's golf game. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I'm really interested. Every round of golf you'll always play, you'll always hit that one shot. You'll always hit that one shot that brings you back every time, the one that you can still remember, to the day you die. What was the one shot on that trip? I know there was a huge number of them, right? It was 20,000 plus, I think. What was that one shot that you remember more than anything? And I want you to tell us about that.
I've actually got two.
We'll allow you to tell us about two.
Well, I've got one. One was obviously holing like a slippery 9-footer or 8-footer down the hill to complete this thing, so.
I've seen the video, Adam. I thought it was about a 5 or 6 footer. I think you're embellishing here.
That's bollocks. It wasn't. It was way longer than that. Okay. Anyway, every time I keep telling you, it's
getting longer and longer.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where Ron and I don't know how many times we talked about this, Ron, but even from the planning stages all the way through to that final putt, we talked about not 3-putting. We had carried this putter the whole way across Mongolia, and I'm a poor putter. I'm like a reasonably good ball striker, but terrible putter. And it was just this like little voice in my mind just saying like, don't 3-putt. And to be able to, rush a 50-footer past by 8 feet on my first go, and then to hole it back down the hill was just like one of the best feelings on the planet, especially when you've been grinding for 80 days. But the second shot was like, I don't know how to really describe it, but it was, we were coming down into this big valley, and we were at the top of this sort of, I would say the top of a hill, and the path that we were going down to the bottom was probably 200, 300 meters down, but it was a slaloming path that had elbows, if you know what I mean. So it was like it went back on itself. What do you say?
Hairpins is the word.
Hairpins, exactly. Sort of like 8 or 9 hairpins, and to chip down would just take so much time. So I told Ron to just head down himself. So he took the cart down these hairpins, and I stayed with Andrew, and I was chipping along this gravel path, and I got to the corner of the hairpin, and there was a bridge that was coming out like 200 meters down, and probably maybe 200 meters like out there. So it was a 200 meter drop, and then 200 meters in length, and I could just see this bridge, and I flushed a 7-iron down there, like over these pine trees, and I jogged down, and the ball was sat on the bridge, and yeah, it was a pretty remarkable shot. So that's incredible. That's that one shot that stands out, and yeah, Andrew actually missed filming it, which was fascinating.
Was that was the 7 the club of choice around the whole of Mongolia?
Well, we thought it might be a 7 or an 8-iron when Ron and I were planning, but you know, when you get yourself into these like rocky valleys or, you know, marshlands, you don't know where the ball, you know, even if you chip it up 60 yards in front of you and it plugs, you don't know where it's gone. And that was the sort of the story of the first 3 or 4 days, where we had to basically keep an eye on where the ball was actually ending up. So we pulled it right back. And, you know, like golf, you set out with a sleeve of 6 balls, and you find yourself sort of 3 or 4, you know, gone by the 9th. You're like, geez, what if I run out? You know, if you're in a tournament situation. So we didn't know how many balls we actually needed. We had 400, but we didn't know whether that would last the 80 days. So we had to be pretty conservative for the first part of the trip. And then when we realized we could start, you know, having full swings and changing up clubs and stuff, you know, as the terrain got better, that's what we did.
From watching the film, the first tee shot, you know, is a wonderfully long backswing and languid and melts it down the middle. And as the days go on, I think the swing got a bit more shorter. Was that to do with injury, or do you think you just lost the will by some point to hit good flushing golf shots? No, it was definitely a combination of wearing a backpack. You know, I was wearing, like, you know, I had golf balls and bit technology inside the bag, so it probably weighed like 4 kilos, 5 kilos. You know, so to have that also, you know, it becomes difficult. You end up swinging around yourself a bit more, and yeah, your swing develops with what you've got. And yeah, it was. You had a proper Tommy Fleetwood finish, I think, going on. That sawn off finish. Yeah, exactly. It was
a little abbreviated follow through here and there.
Everything was punchy, and you know, and maybe when I had a bad back and Ron had to, you know, carry an additional 5 kilos on what he had, I was really, really struggling. And what did you do to get rid of it? Did you have to just get stretching, or just get through it? Well, the thing is, I'm complaining about my back, but Ron actually had to get a hip replacement after this journey. So, like, my back was a fleeting issue. You know, I was like, I couldn't really sleep for about 2.5 weeks, maybe. Like, I was in my tent and I was just sat up on a box inside my tent trying to sleep. I couldn't lie flat or on my front. But, you know, I didn't have to have surgery or anything like that. You know, Ron had a full reconstruction. Proper commitment, Ron.
Guys, incredible. So, guys, you completed this challenge, I think, a couple of years ago. What's life been like since? What, you know, I guess kind of to both of you, you know, Adam, Ron, what's kind of been your involvement in the game of golf since finishing the challenge?
Well, I went pretty much directly into making the film. So I've been quite heavily involved in filmmaking with this film, and then another project which Ron will move on to next. Excuse me. And yeah, so it's weird how I never went into this thinking that we were going to create, you know, even a film that would go on YouTube, or, you know, we would create something that was of, I don't know, I didn't know the quality of what we were going to do, and I never saw myself making it. So I got fairly into filmmaking, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. So yeah, and the film's done pretty well. You know, it's sold it to National Geographic, and it's been to multiple film festivals and stuff like that. So yeah, it's something that I'm super passionate about now.
Yeah. So I guess that picks up. So to answer your question specifically about golf, I used to be a very keen, as a youngster, I was a pretty keen golfer. Never to sort of Adam's level, but I was an enthusiastic golfer and as a schoolboy and a student. And in my sort of 20s, actually living in the UK, I lived in London for a long time and really got into my golf there. But unfortunately, I broke my wrist in about 2012 before my African trip, and had a quite complicated surgery on my wrist. So unfortunately, I think my golf game is I'm doomed or destined to be a caddy for the rest of my life. Is probably the sad reality. So I haven't picked up a golf club since. I haven't actually picked up a golf bag yet, but I'm sure Adam will rope me in for a round next time he's in South Africa.
Sure.
As Adam says, it's crazy how these things work out. Adam never went into this trip with any expectation of what would come out of it, if anything, and obviously it's opened up a new career and a passion for him in filmmaking. I was a bit of a wreck, as Adam said, at the end of the trip, and I took opportunity to go back into the formal working world for a few years, actually back in Hong Kong. Took up a job at the Hong Kong Rugby Union, which is kind of my background. And but after a couple of years and my hip recovering, the lure or the call of the wild came back, and I dreamt up another cycling adventure and spent last year cycling 7.5 months from the UK, from Twickenham Stadium, where my last trip finished, and then cycled to the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. So I spent 7.5, 8 months riding across Europe and Asia. So basically continuing my previous journey that I finished in 2015.
Wow, and we definitely don't want to spend any time talking about the Rugby World Cup final at all, if that's okay, Ron.
No, it was good fun, and it's actually crazy because it's kind of it meant that I guess Adam and I it continued our journey together, because when I sort of came up with the idea of putting this trip together, and it was an obvious thing to put together a documentary. We had a little bit more budget this time. We had a proper sponsor. There's only one person I was going to phone up, and one group of people, and that was Adam and Andrew, the guys who made the longest hole. And when you do an expedition like this, when you've got people who are coming to meet you in some of the most remote rural places on the planet, and often in sometimes inaccessible and difficult conditions, it's such a comfort to have people that you know around you, people that understand what being on a difficult expedition is like. So you can sense it makes a really big difference. So I saw more of Adam last year. I think he came out 7 times to join us on the trip, him and Andrew.
Wow.
So it almost became like, Bulgaria, see you next week in Istanbul, see you in a month in India or whatever it was. So I saw we actually saw plenty of each other last year, and Adam and Andrew have been working hard on producing a documentary of that trip. And as I say, it ends with Sia Khaleesi lifting up the World Cup. So perfect end to the journey.
I bet you were pretty chuffed with that.
Especially as the guy I cycled with was an Englishman, so that made it even more sweeter.
I can imagine the disappointment.
Did you manage to get in the stadium, or did you have to watch it from outside?
Oh, we were very lucky. No, we actually took we did it with DHL and World Rugby. The DHL sponsored us, and we were actually raising money for a charity in Southeast Asia, which was the official charity of the World Cup. So World Rugby actually gave us the official match whistle for the opening game.
Wow.
So we carried that the whole way with us. And so we were very lucky enough to have tickets to the opening game. And I think we ended up going to about a dozen matches during the World Cup. So we were very spoiled and looked after. And it was I spent 2 months in Japan following the World Cup around and undoing all the good work of 8 months of cycling. I think I put more weight on in 8 weeks than I lost in 8 months.
That was worth it.
I mean, it's just incredible. Guys, one of the things we're really interested in when we talk to guests on the show is kind of their perspective of where the game's at. So I guess, we're in the middle of the coronavirus. We're in a situation where a large percentage of the world is on some form of lockdown. Sports, particularly live sports, but also kind of people playing games, has kind of greatly diminished for a short period of time and hopefully not too long. And you're also from different parts of the world. I'd be really interested to kind of get your take on where you think golf's at right now, and kind of what you see and observe as kind of people in those countries, in terms of the game of golf, really.
Yeah, so like growing up in Hong Kong, and it's sort of paradox growing up in Northern Ireland as well. So, golf for me has always been something almost unobtainable in Hong Kong, and then it has an abundance in Northern Ireland. So it's a very strange setup that I have here. But yeah, I'm like I feel that what Ron and I did, it sort of came out of me in terms of where I feel golf should be. It should be more accessible. The stuffiness of everything. I've never fitted in a golf club before. I've never been a member until I was 18, and I joined Port Stewart in Northern Ireland for peanuts, and it's an amazing course. And I'm so privileged to be able to play there and have that outlet. But when you come to Hong Kong and you having very little land and space and these expensive memberships, you find yourself just wanting to play and never having access, and it's just such an unfortunate situation. And yeah, it would be cool that golf would the masses could play it and it'd be available for a lot of people. And I think that's the way the game has to go. It has to loosen up, and I think what me and Ron have done possibly broke a few barriers there.
Definitely, and there's still some talent coming out of the Far East, isn't there? When you look at places like South Korea, has had a huge kind of surgence in the professional game, and you're seeing some talent. But notwithstanding, there's geographies where traditional 18-hole courses are just really hard to squeeze into a land, and there's a premium on that real estate, right, which comes through in the price of memberships. I guess, Ron, you've almost got it's the complete opposite really in South Africa, where there's an abundance of kind of natural landscape, but equally not always, it's probably not always attainable. Is that fair to say?
I'd say, certainly partially so. We are very lucky with the weather. Obviously in South Africa, we're having space. And I think the game has changed in 20 years or 30 years. I remember growing up as a schoolboy and, when we used to go and be a junior member of a particular club in Durban, and it was always like the members would sort of like look down at you, and they're the juniors, and they would always be shouting at you to pull up your socks, and and it was just like the sort of feeling that you weren't particularly welcome with open arms. But I certainly think that has changed the most courses in South Africa. I think the game of golf in South Africa is obviously. I mean, we have the unique situation of having apartheid in South Africa, until 1994, and literally golf, non-whites were banned from playing the game of golf, or certainly at certain clubs. So, obviously that was a huge shift in the game, and for a lot of older people and conservative people, I think that probably came as a bit of a shock, and it's crazy to think that was only 20 years ago. But certainly there's a big push in South Africa at the moment to sort of bring young black people into the game of golf. There's a huge untapped market, and there are a lot of golf courses that are actually really, really reasonably priced. I mean, Adam and I, we haven't spoken about, we actually did some fundraising for South African golf development when we did our trip, and there's a lot of really, really good people giving youngsters an opportunity to discover this game. There's a lot of people out there collecting old golf equipment that people can use it. So I really hope, South Africa, we have a great golfing history. At one stage, I think we had like 3 or 4 players in the world top 10. When Ernie Els and Retief Goosen and Charles Schwartz all at the top of their game, which, I mean, in terms of proportion for the size of our golf market was incredible. And I just look forward to the day that we have a young black youngster coming through and in the world's top 10 for the first time. And I think it's inevitable it will happen at some stage.
In terms of my point of view, in terms of like traditional golf, like exactly what Ron's talking in terms of breaking the mold and the etiquette, the stiff upper lip etiquette needs to go, I think. But in terms of the laws of the game, like I'm fully, like, it needs to completely, stay a very thick line. This Patrick Reed stuff going on at the moment, and like this is super damaging for the game. And like I say to Ron, or I said to a load of my mates, like there's not one time in the desert I did that. You know what I mean? Where I had like a lie where there is sand at the back of the ball, and you just have to dig it out. And I just feel that there's some things that you can't change in golf, and these are the rules.
I agree, Adam. I think the kind of you ask anybody globally, and people will say golf is a game of integrity first and foremost. And we've talked about it previously on the pod with the stuff around Patrick Reed. When you think that you set out over the terrain you're talking about, over the time and distance, and you've played everything within the spirit of the rules, and you're diligently dropping a golf ball and taking line and sight and a penalty shot when you've lost it. I just think it's incredible when you see then the role models that people look up to and some of the behaviour. I think, like you say, it's so important that stays, but it's just about making it more accessible to a wider market so that the game can grow. Sorry, Tom, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, I think it's like when I think it's in the film there was a quote, "Unplayable, my dick." And then you went and took your kneecaps out.
Yeah, that was probably not one of my.
Why don't you tell the listeners that story?
Okay, well. We were. I mean, it was probably one of the most hairiest sort of parts of the trip. We were going up this very rocky valley, and if anyone hasn't seen what Ron and I do, I would hit a ball, and then when we were on a very steep incline, I would push the back of the cart, and we would lift it and push it over rocks, and and once we got to the ball, Ron would anchor himself into the hill, and then I would hit it again, and I hit it out of this rocky line. I got the ball sort of up to the top of one of these hills, and I helped Ron push the cart all the way to the top, and then jogged all the way back down to hit my shot. And I hit it up there, and it miraculously missed a few trees and sort of got to the apex of the hill. And there's a scene in the film where Ron has his arms wide outstretched, like, "You did it, boss." And then he looks down at the ball and goes like, "Actually, but it's unplayable." And then I walk up the hill to the top of the apex, and I look at the ball, and it's sort of in this crevice. And I say, "Unplayable, my dick." But I actually have a line before that for all those golf buffs out there. It goes, "Jordan Spieth, you're a pussy," before I actually hit the ball. Which is, if you guys, this is a bit of golf knowledge. When did Jordan Spieth take an unplayable drop and then win the Open?
Birkdale 17.
From the and then he got relief from the Tigers.
And he's got it right back. Yeah.
Unplayable, my dick, and then said, "Jordan Spieth, you're a pussy," and then the ball ricocheted off a rock straight into my kneecap, and I was rising around, holding my knee. But yeah, it wasn't the greatest of situations.
See, I know a lot of members that. I know a lot of golfers that have said that was a rabbit scraping, Adam. So you did well to stick within the rules of the game there.
Look, guys, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and tell us about your trip. What you've done is absolutely insane. It's incredible. Like how you managed to get through it mentally and physically is just beyond me. And we really look forward to hopefully seeing the film coming out soon in Europe.
Yeah, definitely, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great talking to you, and you guys make sure you stay safe through the next few months with all this virus stuff going on.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Absolute pleasure. Cheers, boys.
Cheers. Peace out.
Watch this.